when the enemy's weapon becomes your own. The Vietnam Shot. In the mid-1960s, the United States entered Vietnam with absolute confidence in its technological superiority. American industry had delivered a new rifle meant to symbolize the future of warfare, the M16. Lightweight, fast-firing, modern, it was designed to replace the heavy steel and wood weapons of the past. On paper, it was revolutionary. In the jungle, it became a nightmare. Vietnam was not Europe. It was heat, humidity, mud, and rain that never seemed to stop. Weapons were soaked constantly. Fine dirt crept into every mechanical part. Ammunition degraded. Lubricants failed. And the M16 failed with them. Early versions of the rifle suffered from catastrophic reliability problems. Jams were frequent. Failures to extract spent casings left soldiers desperately trying to clear their weapons under fire. Some rifles arrived without proper cleaning kits. Others used incorrect gunpowder, accelerating fouling. For American infantrymen, the consequences were deadly. In firefights where seconds meant survival, a jammed rifle was a death sentence. That was when many soldiers noticed something unsettling. The enemy's weapons did not stop. Captured North Vietnamese and Viet Cong fighters carried AK-47s, rifles that looked crude, heavy, and outdated by Western standards. They were made of stamped steel and rough wood. They rattled when shaken. They kicked hard when fired. But they worked, rain or shine, clean or filthy. Day after day, American soldiers began to pick them up from the battlefield. At first, it was curiosity, then necessity. Some infantrymen quietly abandoned their issued rifles and replaced them with captured AK-47s. The reasons were simple and brutal. The AK fired every time the trigger was pulled. Its 7.62 by 39 mm rounds punched through jungle vegetation. Magazines fed reliably even when dented or dirty. It was not comfort, it was survival. Officially, this practice was forbidden. Using enemy weapons created identification risks. Friendly forces could mistake AK fire for hostile contact. Ammunition resupply was uncertain. Unofficially, commanders often looked the other way. Reports from the field told a clear story. Soldiers trusted the AK-47 more than their own rifle. The psychological impact was profound. For the first time since World War II, American troops faced the reality that their enemy possessed a weapon better suited to the battlefield than their own. This was not a failure of courage or training. It was a failure of assumptions. Technology alone did not win wars. Reliability did. The jungle of Vietnam became the AK-47's proving ground against Western doctrine. What had been designed as a weapon for mass armies revealed itself as something far more dangerous, a rifle perfectly adapted to chaos. And as American soldiers learned to trust the enemy's weapon, the U.S. military began to take notice. Quietly, systematically. What started as an act of desperation in the jungle would soon become an institutional strategy, one that would blur the line between friend and foe in ways few could have imagined. Chapter 2. Fighting Without a Signature. MACV-SOG and the Weapon of Anonymity. By 1966, the Vietnam War had expanded beyond what the public ever saw. While conventional American units fought openly across South Vietnam, a different war was unfolding in silence, across borders that officially did not exist. Laos, Cambodia, North Vietnam. This was the domain of MACV-SOG, the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. Its missions were classified, its operators were deniable, and its survival depended on something more than skill. It depended on invisibility. MACV-SOG teams were small, often fewer than a dozen men, operating deep behind enemy lines. Their objectives included reconnaissance, sabotage, prisoner snatches, and psychological warfare. Extraction was never guaranteed. Air support was limited. If compromised, there would be no reinforcements. Everything they carried had to help them disappear. American weapons were a liability. The sound of an M16, the brass casings it ejected, the distinctive signature of Western ammunition. All of it could expose an American presence instantly. So MACV-SOG made a radical decision. They armed themselves with the enemy's weapons. AK-47s became standard issue for many teams. Soviet and Chinese variants were preferred. Their reliability was already proven. Their ammunition was abundant in enemy territory. Their sound blended perfectly into the battlefield. If a firefight erupted, it would sound like an internal communist clash. That deception saved lives. Operators modified their AKs for their missions. Some shortened barrels for jungle maneuverability. Others used captured magazines marked to distinguish friendly weapons from enemy ones. Training manuals were rewritten. American commandos learned how to field strip, repair, and fight with Kalashnikovs as naturally as their adversaries. This was no longer improvisation. It was doctrine. But anonymity went further than sound. Spent casings left on the ground told a story. Soviet calibers pointed away from U.S. involvement. Even weapon malfunctions, or lack of them, reinforced the illusion. MACV-SOG had weaponized ambiguity. Ironically, many operators came to prefer the AK-47 not just for its cover, but for its performance. In short, violent engagements, its stopping power and reliability were unmatched. Mud, rain, blood, none of it mattered. The rifle functioned. In after-action reports, the pattern was consistent. When things went wrong, the AK kept firing. When extraction was delayed, it kept working. When survival came down to one trigger pull, it did not hesitate. The United States had not just adopted the enemy's weapon, it had embraced it. And yet, this embrace came with a darker realization. If American soldiers trusted the AK-47 with their lives, then so did their enemies. And that trust was about to be exploited, deliberately. What followed was one of the most disturbing psychological warfare operations of the Cold War, an operation designed not to defeat the AK-47, but to turn it against the very people who believed in it. Operation Eldest Son, turning trust into terror. By 1967, American intelligence had reached a disturbing conclusion. The AK-47 was not just reliable, it was trusted. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong fighters believed in their rifle completely. It was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of survival, revolution, and victory over Western technology. And that belief presented an opportunity. If the AK-47 could not be defeated on the battlefield, perhaps it could be destroyed psychologically. The CIA and U.S. Special Forces launched a covert psychological warfare campaign with a chilling objective: make the enemy fear their own weapon. The operation was called Eldest Son. Its method was as simple as it was brutal. American operatives secretly manufactured sabotaged enemy ammunition. These rounds looked identical to standard Soviet or Chinese 7.62 by 39mm cartridges. But inside, a carefully calibrated overpressure explosive replaced the normal powder charge. When fired, the cartridge did not propel the bullet. It detonated the rifle. Barrels burst. Receivers shattered. Bolts were driven backward with lethal force. The shooter was often killed instantly or permanently maimed. The genius of Eldest Son was not the explosion. It was the doubt. These booby-trapped rounds were not used in combat by Americans. Instead, they were planted in enemy ammunition caches along trails, supply depots, and hidden stockpiles. No firefight, no warning, no visible American involvement. Just a soldier pulling the trigger and dying. When reports began spreading through communist units, confusion turned into fear. Fighters could not tell which ammunition was safe. Every cartridge became a potential death sentence. Was it sabotage? A factory defect? Divine punishment? No one knew. The psychological impact was devastating. Units began discarding ammunition. Trust in logistics collapsed. Fighters hesitated before firing, something no soldier can afford in battle. The AK-47, once a symbol of certainty, had become a source of anxiety. And the most terrifying part? The rifle itself was innocent. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do. The Americans had turned belief into a weapon. Eventually, the North Vietnamese command issued strict inspections. Suspect ammunition was destroyed. Supply chains tightened. Eldest Son was phased out before it could be exposed publicly. But the damage was already done. The operation revealed something profound. Wars are not won only with bullets. They are won with fear. Ironically, this psychological attack reinforced the AK-47's legend. Once the sabotage ended, confidence returned. Fighters realized the rifle was not flawed. The world was simply ruthless. The AK survived the attack, and so did its reputation. But the United States had learned something equally important. The AK-47 was not just an enemy weapon. It was a global platform, one that could be used, abused, feared, and respected. That realization would shape American military policy for decades to come. Because after Vietnam, the AK-47 did not disappear from U.S. strategy. It became something far more unsettling. A tool. The ultimate irony. How America made peace with the enemy's rifle. When the Vietnam War ended, the AK-47 should have faded into history, at least in American hands. It did not. Instead, the rifle followed U.S. forces into every major conflict of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Not as a trophy, but as a tool. The irony was complete. From enemy weapon to strategic asset. After Vietnam, American military planners faced a hard truth. The AK-47 was everywhere. It armed allies and enemies alike. It dominated battlefields in Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and Asia. It was simple, cheap, and universally understood. Ignoring it was no longer an option. So the United States adapted. Special Forces units began formal training on the AK platform, not as a curiosity, but as a necessity. Soldiers learned how to fire it, clear malfunctions, replace parts, and keep it running with minimal tools. Why? Because in real-world operations, American troops might need to use captured weapons, blend into hostile environments, train foreign allies, repair rifles in the field with no supply chain. The AK-47 was no longer the enemy's rifle. It was the world's rifle. Plausible deniability in special operations. In covert missions, especially during the Cold War, the AK became invaluable. Sound matters in combat. The sharp crack of an M16 or M4 could instantly reveal an American presence. The deeper, familiar sound of an AK-47 could disappear into the noise of local forces. Captured rifles allowed U.S. operatives to move unseen, not physically, but politically. No American casings, no American weapons, no American fingerprints. The rifle that once symbolized communist revolution now enabled American strategy. History, once again, folded back on itself. Iraq, Afghanistan, and the return of pragmatism. After 2001, the AK-47 re-entered U.S. military planning on an unprecedented scale. In Iraq and Afghanistan, American forces were tasked with building new local armies and police forces. Training these units on Western rifles would have been costly, slow, and impractical. Instead, the Pentagon did something remarkable. It bought AKs, tens of thousands of them. The logic was brutally simple. Local fighters already knew the weapon. Spare parts were everywhere. Maintenance was minimal. Ammunition was globally available. The AK-47 was not just familiar, it was efficient. American advisors trained soldiers on a rifle originally designed to fight American power. And it worked. Respect without romance. Despite its reputation, the U.S. military never romanticized the AK-47. They understood its limitations, crude ergonomics, limited accuracy at range, heavy recoil, but they respected its strengths, unmatched reliability, simplicity under stress, global adaptability. The AK was not admired. It was accepted, and in warfare, acceptance is often more important than admiration. The rifle that defeated ideology. In the end, the AK-47 did something no weapon was supposed to do. It escaped ideology, born from Soviet doctrine, inspired partly by American engineering, used by revolutionaries, dictators, insurgents, and democracies alike. It served anyone who needed a rifle that worked. That is its true legacy. Not as a symbol of communism, not as an enemy of the West, but as proof that in war, practicality always outlives politics. The rifle sent to impress, the rifle that inspired, the rifle that refused to belong to anyone.